Daf Vav Amud Beis, the Mishnah right at the top of the Amud. We're continuing on with the discussion of things that were extra or surplus monies that were set aside for the korbanos. We learned previously in the Mishnah that a person is mechanis mois, and he says Harei Elul Shikli. That we had Machlekes Beis Shammai says Moisrin Nedava, and Beis Hill says Moisrin is Chulin. And then we had the details of the different ways of what of the moiser is. So the Mishnah is continuing. Moiser shkolim chulin. The excess, the surplus money set up for shkolim is chulin. Like we learned before, that Beis Hillel, the shita Beis Hillel, that hektish betos is not hektish. So therefore, the moiser of shkolim is chulin. Moiser is a series eifa, but the extra money that's set aside for the series eifa for a mincha, the tenth of an eifa for a mincha, we'll see in the Gemara what type of mincha we're talking about. Or moiser kinei zav and kinei zav is kinei yolda, some money that the surplus money that's set aside for buying a pair of the korbanos for a zov, the zov that has to bring or a zova, or a yolda, or the woman who gave birth, that she has to bring the pair of the korbanos, or chatos vashamas, money that was set aside for chatos and asham, the surplus money. So in these cases, we say in all these cases that moisran are nadava, that the excess money, the surplus money, is a nadava. So that goes to the mizbeach, and it goes to ketz hamizbeach. In the case of chatos and the shamas, it goes for ketz hamizbeach. It's to be makriv on the mizbeach, where there's no other korbanos, so the mizbeach is idle. What we're makriv on the mizbeach with this money. Zaklal, this is the rule. Kol shu bal l'shem chatas mishum asham moisr nedava. Anything that was chatas and asham, then the excess is considered to be an nedava, and it goes for an nedava. And as we'll see, therefore, also when you have the yoldas, the zav and the zavos, even if it's not completely a chatas, but there's a chatas mixed in of it. Some is a chatas and some is not, but it goes moisra. The excess is for nedava as long as some of it is for a chatas, as opposed to the next case. The Mishnah continues moisra oila. Now, if it's purely an oila, if it's excess money, surplus money that was collected for the purpose of a korban oila, then we say that surplus should be used for korban oila. Moisar mincha lemincha, or mincha for mincha, moisar l'shlom l'shlomim. There we use the excess money for this specific korban. But achatas and an osham, you can't bring achatas and osham for nedava. Achatas and osham in a bon nedava. So the excess money can't be used for achatas and osham. Therefore, it's used for a nedava. And if the chatas money or asham money is mixed in even with other monies that are an oila, all of it has to go for a nedava. But if it's completely money for an oila or for a mincha or a shlomim, then it's used for these specific korbanos. Moisra pesach l'shlomim. If there was surplus money set aside for korban pesach, then it's extra and it's not needed for this year. For the next year, it's not brought as a korban pesach. That's brought for shlomim. Moiser nazirim lenazirim. Money that was collected for poor nazirim. So it was collected for poor nazirim and they couldn't afford it, and there was surplus money, so it should be used for other nazirim. It was not collected for any specific nazir to begin with. It was collected in a general fund for poor nazirim, so it can be used for other poor nazirim. Moiser nazir, but if it was for a private nazir, there was a specific nazir that this money was collected for, then it can't go to anybody else. Then the extra is l'nedava. It goes for the nedava for korbanos tzibur. Omar zok the Gemara Amar v'yisi ad anan tamat. So he said, when I was still in Bavel, Shami's call, I heard the voice of Rav Yehuda Shol Shmuel, that the voice of the Rav Yehuda asked Shmuel the following question: if a person is mafresh, is Masechet Shekalim, and he died before it was given to hektish, what's the din? Amarle yiplu l'nedava. He says it goes for a nedava. So since the Masechet Shekel comes for a kapora, it comes l'chaper al nafshei seichem. Therefore, it has a din similar to a chatas. It goes l'nedava. Moiser Asir Saifa Shaloi, what the Kohen Gadol, if he has the Moiser, the excess money of an Asir Saifa of his korban, the Kohen Gadol brought the minchas chavitin that came from a serious ephah of fine flour, and machzis in the morning, babayker, and machzis be'erev in the afternoon. If he collected money was collected for the purpose of his Kohen Gadol's mincha, of the mincha of the Kohen Gadol, and there's extra money. What do you do with this extra money? Rabbi Yochanan Amri says, he says you can't do anything with them, you have to throw it into Yam HaMelech. And Rabbi Lazar Amar Yiplon Adova. He says Yiplon Adova. Rabbi Lazar says it has a din just like a chatas, because the pasuk in Yechezkel says Yaakov chatasai. So therefore, just like the moiser the chatas and the dova, here also the dova. Rabbi Yochanan says it has a shame of chatas b'shem only, shame bavad, only a name, but it doesn't really have a din of a kapara of a chatas, and therefore there's nothing that can be done with it. Well, apparently the Mishnah is not like Rav Yochanan, because the Mishnah says Masechet Shekalim Chulin, Masechet Asir Saifa, Masechet Kinei Zavin, Kinei Zavais, Masechet Kinei Yoldas, Chatois Vashamas, Masechet Nedava. The Mishnah says Masechet Nedava, so it says clearly by the case of Asir Saifa that it's a Nedava. So Ma'avalei Rav Yochanan, how Rav Yochanan going to understand and interpret the Mishnah? He'll interpret it as a minchas chayta of a kol Yisrael, meaning if they're not the Kohen Gadol's mincha, which Rabbi Yochanan says is not a chatas, it's not mamish a chatas, but a minchas chayta, if a person was a chayta, and one of the averes where he has to bring a korban chatas, if it's a korban oil of a yored, one of the averes, for instance, Tumas Mikdash V'Kodoshav, or Shua's Sheker, swearing falsely, so, or the Shua's Hadus. So these are korban oil v'yer. If the person is poor, very poor, b'dali dalos, then he brings a mincha. So this type of a mincha is a chatas, and therefore, for that type of mincha, it's yiplon adova. But Rabbi Yochanan holds that the Asir Sefer, the Kohen Gadol, that is not a chatas, and therefore Yolichem Liyam HaMelech. Rabbi Yossi Omar Aldo Al Abba Barbo, he said he had a kasha, a taina, to what they were saying, to what the Chachamim in Babel said. The Inun Amrin, because the Chachamim Babel said, Meinayin Shal Pesach Mishtan L'Shem Shlomim. How do you know that the Meiser to the Pesach, that the surplus of the Pesach becomes a shlomim? If you don't use if the korban pesach, it was an animal which was designated for a korban pesach and was not used, that it becomes a shlomim. Talmud Loimer ve'im tzayin karbana l'zevach shlomim. The Torah says ve'im tzayin karbana, it should be for l'zevach shlomim. So what does it mean to say v'im tzayin karbana? It means to say kol shu min atzayin v'shlomim. Means any korban that comes from tzayin, that comes from the flock, from the sheep or goats, it should become a shlomim if it's not brought in the proper time. So if you didn't bring the korban pesach when it's supposed to, it turns into a shlomim. Haitivon, and so he had a taina as follows. Hare oila min atzayin. Well, then you should say the same thing by an oila, that if an oila is not brought, that it should become a shlomim. So therefore, if you have excess money for an oila, that also should turn into a shlomim. The Gemara says no. That's not so, because davar she'ein bo element atzayin. No, it's not referring to an oila, because we're referring to something that can only come from tzayin, where oila yatzas oila she'iba afilu min habaker. An oila can come not only from tzayin, it can also come from cattle. It's not exclusive, but the korban pesach is only min tzayin. So something which is min tzayin, only from a tzayin, that becomes a shlomim. Aitivin, is that so? Hare Asham, or what about the korban Asham? It also only comes from tzayin, so you should say that the Maisa, the surplus money of an Asham, should become a shlomim. Where it says no. Omar Rebbe Bun Bar Kahana, he says, min hat tzayin. It says mina da tzayin davar shuba mikol tzayin. It says something that comes from all type of tzayin, meaning sheep and goats. But yotza sheep and goats, yotza asham sheina ba ela min kvasim belvad. But the asham only comes from the kvasim, but it doesn't come from goats. It comes from the sheep and not from goats. So therefore, it's not referring to the korban asham. Frag the Gemara. Normally, when we say min, it's an exclusion. It's a mute from this, but not all of this. Now, vakan at amar min l'rabbis. Now here you're saying min at tzayin is a ribo. You're marba all types of tzayin. So that is contrary to the way we normally understand the word min, which is a mute. Amar Rimana, he answered, Hachanami min l'mayit. It also means to be mamayit. Miyot she'ena ba ben shtei shonim. Meaning it's from a tzayin, from the word tzayin means from all types of tzayin. The word min is a miyot. It's being mamayit that it doesn't come from a 2-year-old. The Korban Pesach has to be within the first year. So that's where the surplus, the moiser, turns into a shlamim. A korban which is min at tzayin, from the tzayin, only from tzayin, but from the tzayin within the first year, not a 2-year-old. And miyot she'ena ba nekeva. And it's also miyot that it can't come in a cave. The korban Pesach is only a zochar. So it's a miyot. It's from the tzayin, from the zochar, not from the cave. So therefore, it is referring only to the korban Pesach. So, frag the Gemara, v'gali asham nami, and we would have said the same thing by asham, if not for the fact that we have min hot sign extra heavy sign that it has to be something which comes from all type of sign, not asham which does not come from the izim. I would have said by gabe asham nami, min is lamayid, who's also a miyat, she'ena ba ela min kvasim belvad, and I would have said that it would apply to an asham which it only comes from the sheep and not from the goats. But since I have the hot sign, I cannot be marba the asham, so therefore it's only the korban Pesach. So the Pesach converts to a shlamim. So frag the Gemara, hitivon, well, for the kasha v'aksiv min atzayin korbanim min aksavim mina izim la'oila. We have a similar type of pasuk which says it by a oila. So should you therefore say, just like you're saying by shlamim, should you say me'ata ma'aser pesach ba'oila? Should you say that the surplus, the pesach becomes an oila? Rabbi Avon, he says no. We had two options. We have that the Meiser Pesach could become Shlomim, or perhaps, as you say, for an oila, but we would say Minasvara that it's converted to something which is similar. So the Korban Pesach is a korban which is eaten. The Shlomim is a korban which is eaten. We transfer something l'achila, davar achila, ve'en rishanim davar shu l'achila, the davar she'enu l'achila, but not something which is in the korban which is not eaten, meaning an oila. We don't transfer the Pesach to become an oila which is totally burnt, kula kolil, and is not eaten. Amar Rav Yesi about Rabbi Bun, he says a different chiluk, Mishan Mekachim Kalam, Mishim Kachim Kalam. Both the Korban Pesach and the Shlom are Kachim Kalam. So therefore they have that similarity. I would say it's converted to something more similar to a Korban Shlomim. Vein Mishan Kachim Kalam, Mishim Kachim Kachim, but not to an Oila, which is Kachim Kachim. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Aldo Alel Rabbi Chanina, he said for the following reason that Rabbi Chanina objected to the Chachmei Baval, the Inun Amrin, they said Eina Pesach Mishtana L'Shem Shlomim, it's not converted to the Shlomim, Ela Imkein Shachta L'Shem Shlom, unless it was shechted for the Korban Shlomim. But I say I feel a Shachta L'Shem Oila, but I say even if it was shechted for an Oila, it still is converted and becomes a Shlomim. Amar Rabbi Yila, time of the Rabbi Yochanan. What's the reason for Rabbi Yochanan? Because it says Im min hatzayin karbano zevach shlomim. It says Im min hatzayin, it becomes a shlomim. Now it says, as when it says Im min korban zevach shlomim, as the min korbonai, it's extra. It could have just said Im min hatzayin lezevach shlomim. It says min korbonai, it says lezevach shlomim. So therefore, what do we darshan from this? Therefore, it says kol shehu zevach b'al shlamim. It says that whatever it's a zevach, that the whatever it's you shechted for, that it's for a zevach, it automatically becomes a shlomim, even if it's not shechted for a shlomim. Kolshu zevach, that whatever it's shechted for, that it's whatever korban it is, as long as it's a zevach, it's shlomim. It automatically becomes shlomim. Fragt Gemara umishtana l'machshava psul. Well, what if he shechted it for an oila, but with a machshava psul to make it possible? A machshava. Now we said before that if he shechted it for an oila, it still becomes a shlomim, and it's a kosher shlomim. But what happens if he does it with machshava of a psul? Do we say the machshava of a psul renders it possible? Fracting more hechavida. What's the case? Shachta l'shem oila almanas lizrak dam l'machar. You're going to say that the case is that he shechted it for an oila with an intention to do the zrika the next day, which would passel the korban. Mikol makam passel. In any event, it's passel. So what's the difference? Even if you say that the machshava would be for a shlomim, would still be passel. When it says in Tamer Mishtana l'machshavas psul, if you say that it changes to the machshava of what the psul is, then you say that it's possible. In Tamer Mishtana l'machshavas psul, pigel. If you say it's mishtana for machshava apostle, that it becomes apostle, so then it's a korban which is possible. Then it's possible but not pigel. Pigel is if it's a korban that is in all other respects would be kosher, then except for the machshava that it was chutz l'zmana, then it's pigel, and ha'oichla, the one who eats it, is chayiv kares. If it's something that passels, which is a different psul aside from the pigel aspect of it, then it's not pigel. It's posel, but it's not pigel. There's no chayiv kares. So if you say that it changes to the machshava of the psul, so there it becomes the korban as possible. Then it's not pigel. But if you say that it's not mishtan from machshava psul, then we say that, well, the korban is the machshava to change it for an oila, for a posel oila, is not taken into account. So it remains as a shlomim with a machshava for chutz l'zmanai, so it's pigel. And therefore, it's not only posel, it's pigel. If you say that it's mishtana for a psul, so it's considered he shechted it, this surplus Pesach, for an oila chutz l'zmanai, then he shechted it for machshava for something that's posel. It posel the korban. But if not, then we say we don't take that into account as machshava for the oila. It's like he shechted and shlomim chutz l'zmanai, and it's actually pigel. Well, let's say it's a Pesach during the rest of the year, which should be Vishlamim. And he shechted it lishma or shaloi lishma. Now, Pesach, if you shech the korban Pesach during the rest of the year for a korban Pesach, it makes it possible. If it's the right time, if it's shechted for a korban Pesach, it's kosher. But if it's the rest of the year and it's shechted for a korban Pesach, then it's possible. If he shechts it for a shlomim, then it's kosher. Now let's say he shechted it, part of the shchita was lishma, it was for the Pesach, which would passel it, but then he finished off with the machshava of shaloi lishma, which would make it kosher. So the question is, does his machshava shaloi lishma uproot the machshava of lishma, and is it kosher or not? Rabbi Bun Barchi B'Shem Shmuel Bar Abba, he says, Mikevan Sha'amar Shaloi Lishma, once he concluded it with the machshava Shaloi Lishma, Nasa Kesheich B'Shtika Shaloi Lishma Kosher. It would be just like he did a B'Shtika and Shaloi Lishma, which would be kosher, meaning the machshava of Shaloi Lishma uproots the machshava of Lishma. It's just like he was silent and then concluded with the machshava of Shlomim, which renders it kosher. Amrullah, they said, Im Kain, if that's the case, then I feel shakta lishma amanas lizrak dom shaloi lishma. Well, I should say, take it a step further. Even if he did the entire shchita lishma, but he did the zrika shaloi lishma, should I not say that the zrika should uproot the shchita and it should be kosher? So yasam misharishana kishayt lishma shaloi lishma v'yeh kosher. It should be like your case of lishma l'shaloi lishma and should also be kosher. Amar Rabbi Abba Mori, he said, no. Minolan b'shtika kosher. How do you know that if he shechs it b'shtika and to do the zrika, the shaloi lishma, it's kosher. Dilma b'shtika posel. Maybe it's posel. Meaning, in the case that we were discussing where the shchita itself is shaloi lishma, you say the shaloi lishma of the shchita, the latter part of the shchita uproots the first part of it. But over here, the shaloi lishma is in a different avodah completely. It's in the zrika, it's not in the shchita. So therefore, how do you know to say that it would be considered to say like the shchita was bishtika and the zrika was shaloi lishma and it should be kosher? Maybe we can't say that the zrika shaloi lishma will uproot the shchita. The latter part of the shchita will uproot the first part of the shchita, but not a different avodah.